I never imagined that the moment I finally chose myself would come wrapped in something so cold, so calculated, and yet so strangely freeing. That morning didn't feel special at first. It began like so many others in that house, quiet, predictable, and heavy with something unspoken. I stood in the kitchen, watching the kettle begin to tremble before it whistled, my hands steady even though my thoughts weren't. I had already been awake for hours. Sleep hadn't been easy lately. The house was large, modern, and always spotless, but it never felt like home to me. Not anymore. Anna, we need to talk. Her voice came from behind me, sharp and perfectly composed. I didn't need to turn around to know she was standing there, arms crossed, already impatient.
Claire.
My daughter-in-law. I slowly turned off the stove and faced her. She looked exactly as she always did, flawless. Not a wrinkle in her clothes, not a hair out of place. Even at this hour, she looked like she had stepped out of a magazine. It used to impress me once. Now it only made me tired. I'm listening, I said calmly. She walked further into the kitchen, her heels clicking softly against the floor, a sound that always made me feel like I was being inspected rather than spoken to. We've been discussing some changes, she began, her tone smooth but distant. You know how expensive everything has become. I said nothing. I had learned that silence often revealed more than questions. She continued, pouring herself coffee into a cup I used to use years ago, before everything started to shift. It's only fair that everyone contributes equally, she added. I almost smiled at that.
Equally.
At my age, I still cooked every meal, cleaned half the house, and took care of their children whenever they needed. Yet somehow, I was the one who needed to contribute more. I already give you part of my pension, I said quietly. Claire's lips tightened for just a second before she regained her composure. Yes, she said, but that's not enough anymore. There it was. The real conversation. I felt something settle inside me. Not fear, not anger, something steadier. And what exactly do you expect? I asked. She looked directly at me now, no longer pretending. All of it, Anna. The words hung in the air like something solid. We think it makes the most sense, she added. Considering everything we do for you. Everything we do for you. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I studied her face, trying to understand when exactly things had turned this way. When kindness became leverage. When care became currency. And if I don't agree? I asked. For a brief moment, her mask slipped. Just a little, but enough. Then this arrangement no longer works, she said, her voice colder now. We've already looked at some facilities. There's a very nice place not far from here. A nursing home.
Just like that. No hesitation. No softness.
Just a transaction. I stood there, absorbing her words, and something unexpected happened. I felt light. It startled even me. So those are my choices? I said slowly. Give you everything I have or leave. Claire didn't answer right away, but her expression said enough. Yes. Silence filled the kitchen. A long one, the kind that changes things. Then I smiled. And that was the moment everything shifted. Her eyes narrowed immediately. She hadn't expected that. She expected resistance, maybe tears, maybe pleading. But not this. You think this is funny? She asked sharply. No, I said gently. I think it's honest. I turned away from her and walked out of the kitchen. My heart was beating faster now, but not from fear. From clarity. Because the truth was, I had been waiting for this moment. For weeks. Maybe longer. I went upstairs, each step feeling lighter than the last. My room was exactly as I had left it, simple, quiet, and already half detached from the rest of the house in my mind. In the corner stood a suitcase.
Packed. Ready.
I walked over, placed my hand on the handle, and paused for just a second. Not because I was unsure, but because I realized something important. I wasn't being forced out. I was choosing to leave. That changed everything. When I came back downstairs, Claire was waiting near the entrance, arms crossed again. But this time, there was something else in her posture. Uncertainty. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm making your decision easier," I replied. Her brows furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm leaving." The words landed harder than I expected them to. She blinked. Actually blinked. For the first time since I had known her, she didn't have an immediate response. "That's ridiculous," she said finally. "Where would you even go?" I met her gaze calmly. "That's no longer your concern." I moved past her toward the door. Behind me, I heard her voice again, sharper now. "You really think this is going to work? Mark won't support this."
Mark. My son.
I stopped for a moment, but didn't turn around. "I know exactly who he'll support," I said quietly. And I did. That was never the question. The question was whether I would keep supporting a life that was slowly erasing me. I opened the door. Sunlight poured in.
Warm. Bright. Real.
And for the first time in years, I felt it fully. As I stepped outside, I left something behind on the small table near the hallway. A document. One they hadn't even noticed yet. One that would change everything. I didn't look back. Not once. Because sometimes the hardest step isn't leaving. It's realizing you were ready all along. The first night away from that house felt unreal, like I had stepped out of someone else's life and into a quiet space where everything finally belonged to me again. I stayed at my old friend Laura's place, a small apartment filled with mismatched furniture, soft blankets, and the comforting smell of vanilla candles. It wasn't luxurious, it wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful, and for the first time in years, I slept without tension sitting in my chest like a stone. Laura didn't ask many questions when I called her earlier that day. She simply said, "Come over," and that was enough. That's the kind of friendship that survives decades, no explanations required, just understanding. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, my body still tied to old habits. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was, and that familiar anxiety tried to creep in, but then I looked around and realized no one was watching me, no one was judging me, no one was waiting to correct me. I was free. I sat up slowly, listening to the silence. Not the heavy silence from before, filled with tension, but a calm, gentle one. It almost felt unfamiliar. "You're up already?" Laura's voice came from the kitchen. I walked out and found her pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She smiled at me, not with pity, not with concern, just warmth. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "No," I said, taking the mug from her. "I slept better than I have in years." She raised an eyebrow slightly, like she understood more than I was saying. We sat down by the window, morning light spilling across the table, and for a while, neither of us spoke. I think we both knew that once I started talking, everything would come out. "How long?" she finally asked. I stared into my coffee. "Long enough," I said quietly. She nodded. "That bad?" I exhaled slowly. Worse than I admitted to myself. And that was the truth. Because the hardest part wasn't what Claire did, it was how long I allowed it to continue. Not because I was weak, but because I kept convincing myself it wasn't that bad. That it would get better. That I just needed to be more patient, more understanding, more invisible. "They made you feel like a guest in your own life," Laura said. I looked at her, surprised. "Exactly," I whispered. Because that's what it had become. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was a role. A convenient one. Someone who cooked, cleaned, helped, and slowly disappeared in the process. I should have left sooner, I added. No, Laura said firmly. You left when you were ready. Her words stayed with me longer than I expected, because she was right. Leaving isn't just about walking out the door. It's about finally believing you deserve to. Later that day, I sat alone in the guest room, my suitcase still unpacked. I opened it slowly, not because I needed anything, but because I wanted to feel something familiar, something that belonged only to me. At the very bottom, hidden beneath folded clothes, was a small envelope. I took it out carefully. Inside were documents. Not just any documents, plans. My plans. For the past year, I had been preparing quietly. Not dramatically, not impulsively, carefully. I had opened a separate account, one no one knew about. Each month, I transferred small amounts from my pension. Nothing noticeable. Nothing that would raise questions. Just enough. Enough to build something of my own. Enough to leave. I ran my fingers over the paper, remembering how nervous I had been the first time I did it. It felt like betrayal back then, like I was hiding something from my own family. Now I understood. I wasn't betraying them. I was protecting myself. There's a difference. And I wish I had understood that sooner. My phone buzzed suddenly, pulling me out of my thoughts.
Mark.
I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Anna, what are you doing? His voice was tense, controlled, but I could hear the irritation underneath. I'm living, I said calmly. That's not funny, he snapped. You left without saying anything. Claire is worried.
Of course she was.
Is she worried about me? I asked quietly. Or about something else? There was a pause. Too long. Don't start this, he said. You know she's been taking care of you. I closed my eyes for a second. There it was again. That version of reality. The one I had lived inside for years. Mark, I said gently. When was the last time you really looked at me?
Not listened to someone else.
Not assumed. Actually looked. He didn't answer. Do you think I'm incapable? I continued. Do you think I don't understand what's happening around me? That's not what I said. But that's what you believe. Another silence. This one heavier. I don't know what to believe anymore, he admitted finally. And that, at least, was honest. Then start with this, I said. I left because I was no longer respected. Not as your mother. Not even as a person. That's not true, he said quickly, but without conviction. Then ask yourself this, I replied. Since I left, what has Claire talked about more? Me or my money? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew. I'm not coming back, I said calmly. You're being stubborn. No, I said softly. For the first time, I'm being clear. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were steady, and that surprised me, because I expected guilt.
Doubt. Fear.
But instead, there was something else.
Certainty.
That evening, Laura and I sat on the couch, watching something neither of us was really paying attention to. My mind kept drifting, not backward, but forward. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to think about what I actually wanted. Not what was expected, not what was convenient for others, but what I wanted. Have you thought about what's next? Laura asked. Yes, I said after a moment. And I looked at her and smiled slightly. I start over. She smiled back. Good, she said. About time. And she was right. Because starting over isn't about age. It's about decision. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something important. Claire thought she had given me an ultimatum, but in reality, she had given me a door. And I was the one who chose to walk through it. 3 weeks after I left, I found myself sitting across from my son in a quiet cafe I used to visit years ago, back when life felt simpler and conversations didn't carry hidden weight. I hadn't planned this meeting. If it were up to me, I would have waited longer. But when Mark messaged me saying he wanted to talk alone, without Claire, something in me agreed before I had time to overthink it. He looked different when he walked in. Not dramatically, but enough. His shoulders were slightly tense, his expression tired, like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. For a brief moment, I didn't see the man who had stood silently beside his wife for years. I saw my son. The little boy who used to reach for my hand when crossing the street. "You look good," he said as he sat down, almost uncertain. I allowed myself a small smile. "Did you expect me not to?" He hesitated, then shrugged slightly. "I don't know what I expected." That at least was honest. We sat there for a moment, the noise of the cafe filling the silence between us. Cups clinking, quiet conversations, life moving forward around us as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. "Claire says you've been acting strange," he said finally, avoiding my eyes. "That you're confused. Not yourself." I leaned back slightly, studying him. "And what do you think?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, and that told me more than anything he could have said. "I think," he began slowly, "I think you left without explanation. That's not like you." I nodded. "No," I said. "It's not. But staying would have been even less like me." He frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "You're making this sound worse than it is," he said. "We were trying to help you." I felt something tighten in my chest, not pain exactly, but disappointment. "Help me," I repeated quietly. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes," he said, more firmly now. "You live with us. We take care of things. We make sure you're okay." "Mark," I interrupted gently, "when was the last time you asked me what I wanted?" That stopped him. Completely. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his expression shifting as if he was trying to find an answer that didn't exist. "I thought," he started, then trailed off. "You thought what was convenient," I said, not harshly, just plainly. He looked away, his jaw tightening in a way that reminded me painfully of his father. "Claire says you've been forgetting things," he continued after a moment, his voice quieter now. "Misplacing items. Getting confused." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small notebook. He looked at it, confused. "What's that?" he asked. "My memory," I replied. I opened it slowly and flipped through the pages, each one filled with neat, careful handwriting. "April 12th, I read. Claire told you I left the stove on all night. In reality, I had turned it off. She unplugged it afterward and called you." He frowned. "That doesn't make sense," he said. "June 3rd, I continued. "My glasses disappeared. She insisted I had lost them. I found them 2 days later in her drawer." He stared at me now, really staring. "Why would she do that?" he asked. I closed the notebook and looked at him calmly. "That's a better question than the ones you've been asking." Silence fell between us again, but this time it felt different. Heavier, more real. "You've been keeping track of all this?" he asked quietly. "I had to," I said, because little by little I started questioning myself. And I needed to know I wasn't imagining things. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly unsettled. "I don't understand," he muttered. "You didn't want to understand," I corrected gently. That hurt him. I saw it immediately. But sometimes the truth does that. "So what?" he said after a moment, frustration creeping into his voice. "You're saying Claire's been lying about everything?" "I'm saying you should start paying attention to patterns," I replied. "Not just words." He leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply, as if the ground beneath him wasn't as stable as he thought. "And the money?" he asked suddenly. "Why didn't you just agree? It would have solved everything." I almost smiled at that. "No," I said. "It would have ended everything." He frowned. "I don't see the difference." "Of course you don't," I said softly. Because it wasn't your independence being taken piece by piece. That landed. I could see it. Not fully understood, but felt. How are the kids? I asked, changing the subject before the tension grew too sharp. His expression softened slightly.
They miss you, he said.
Especially Liam. He keeps asking when you're coming back. My chest tightened. And what do you tell him?
That you needed time, he said.
I nodded slowly.
Good, I said.
Because that's the truth. He hesitated. Claire told them you weren't feeling well, he admitted.
Of course she did.
I'm not sick, I said calmly. I'm finally thinking clearly. He looked at me again, searching for something, maybe weakness, maybe confusion, but he didn't find it. Instead, he found someone he wasn't used to seeing. Someone who wasn't backing down. So what happens now? He asked. I took a breath. I want to see my grandchildren, I said. Without supervision. Without interference. Just me and them. He hesitated immediately. I don't know if Claire will agree to that. I met his eyes. I'm not asking Claire. That's silence again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was decisive. He looked down at his hands, thinking, weighing something. 2 hours, he said finally. At the park. This weekend. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. All right, I said. We sat there for a few more minutes, neither of us quite ready to leave, but both aware that the conversation had reached its natural end. As we stood up, he looked at me again, his expression softer now. Are you really okay? He asked. And for the first time, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. Not just okay. Better. Stronger. Clearer. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt something shift inside me once again. This wasn't just about leaving anymore. This was about rebuilding. On my terms. And, for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The morning everything finally surfaced started quietly, almost peacefully, the kind of calm that usually comes right before something breaks. I had woken up early, out of habit, and decided to bake something simple before meeting my grandchildren at the park later that day. It felt important to me, small things like this. Warm cookies, familiar smells, something steady in a life that had recently shifted so much. My new apartment was modest, but it was mine. Every object had a place because I chose it. No one moved my things. No one questioned why I kept something or where I left it. That alone felt like luxury. I was placing the last tray of cookies on the table when there was a sharp knock at the door. Too sharp. Too impatient. I froze for a second, already knowing. When I opened the door, Claire stood there. Perfect as always, but this time, the perfection couldn't hide what was underneath. Her eyes were cold, sharp, scanning everything behind me as if she had already decided none of it was good enough. Well, she said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited, this is unexpected. I closed the door slowly, forcing myself to remain calm. I didn't invite you, I said. No, she replied, walking further into the room. But clearly, you've been hiding things. Hiding. Interesting word. I'm not hiding, I said evenly. I'm living. She let out a small laugh, though there was nothing amused about it. Let's not pretend, she said, turning to face me. We found the documents. So that was it. I didn't react immediately, but inside, everything sharpened. What documents? I asked. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Don't do that, she said. The will. The original one. Everything goes to Mark.
Ah, so she still didn't know.
That almost made me smile. Good for you, I said calmly. Her expression changed, just slightly, but enough. You've been playing a very clever game, Anna, she continued, her voice dropping. Pretending to be helpless, dependent, while planning all of this behind our backs. I stepped closer, meeting her gaze. I never pretended to be helpless, I said quietly. You just needed me to be. That hit. I saw in her eyes. For a brief moment, her composure cracked. You think you've won something? She snapped. You walked out with nothing. Nothing. That word again. Did I? I asked softly. She stepped closer now, her voice low and controlled. You're trying to turn Mark against me, she said. That's what this is. I shook my head slightly. If that were true, I replied, I wouldn't have had to do anything at all. Her jaw tightened. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then her attention shifted. To the table. To a single envelope. My heart didn't jump, but it became very still. Before I could move, she reached for it. What's this? She asked, already opening it. That's private, I said firmly, stepping forward. Give it back. But she didn't. She pulled out the paper inside and began scanning it, her expression changing with every second. Confusion, then recognition, then something else.
Shock?
This, she whispered, her voice suddenly unsteady. What is this? I didn't answer right away. I watched her. For the first time since I had known her, she didn't look in control. That's a statement, I said calmly. She looked up at me, her eyes sharp again, but now with something behind them. How much is this? She demanded. You can read, I replied. Her hands tightened around the paper. This isn't possible, she said. You don't have this kind of money. No, I said softly, but someone made sure I would. She stared at me, trying to piece things together. Mark doesn't know about this, she said quickly, almost accusing. He does, I replied. That changed everything. I saw it instantly.
The shift.
The realization. You told him, she said, her voice rising slightly. Yes. When? Before you got here. That wasn't entirely true, but it didn't need to be. All that mattered was what she believed. Her confidence began to crumble, piece by piece. You've been lying to us this entire time, she said. No, I said. I've been surviving. That silence again. But this one was different. This one belonged to me. You think this changes anything? She said finally, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. That money belongs to this family. It is with the family, I replied calmly. Just not under your control. Her eyes flashed. What does that mean? It means, I said, stepping closer, that everything was arranged long before you decided I was a problem. She shook her head slightly, trying to regain her footing. We'll contest it, she said. Mark will fix this. I reached for the notebook on the table. The same one. The one she never knew about. Before you do that, I said, placing it in front of her, you might want to read this. She didn't touch it at first. What is it? She asked. Evidence, I said. That word landed harder than anything else. Her eyes flickered. Every incident, I continued. Every lie. Every time something disappeared. Every time you told Mark I was confused when I wasn't. She looked at the notebook now, but didn't open it. For the first time, she hesitated. You wouldn't, she said quietly. I already did, I replied. The room felt different now. Shifted. Balanced. For years, everything had tilted in her favor. Now it didn't. You're making a mistake, she said, though her voice had lost its edge. No, I said calmly. I already made that mistake. I walked to the door and opened it. Now, I added, you should leave. She didn't move right away. She stood there, still holding the paper, still trying to regain control of something that was no longer hers. This isn't over, she said finally. I met her gaze. I know, I replied. And I did. Because this was never just about money. It was about control. And people like Claire don't let go of control easily. but neither do people who have finally remembered their worth. She walked out without another word. And when the door closed behind her, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I felt something else. Something steady. Because for the first time since everything began, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was ahead. 3 months passed after that confrontation, and for the first time in years, life began to feel stable. Not perfect, not effortless, but steady in a way that didn't require constant vigilance. My days found a rhythm that belonged entirely to me. Mornings with coffee by the window, afternoons spent walking through quiet streets or reading, evenings filled with simple things that once felt like luxuries: silence, choice, control. Mark kept his word and brought the children every weekend. At first, the visits were careful, almost fragile, as if we were all testing something unspoken, but slowly, naturally, they became easy again. Laughter returned. Familiar warmth returned. And with it, a part of me I thought I had lost. We never spoke about Claire during those visits. Not because it didn't matter, but because it wasn't necessary. Her absence said enough. Then one afternoon, everything shifted again. Mark arrived alone. That was the first sign. He didn't come in right away. He stood at the door for a moment longer than usual, like he was preparing himself for something. "Can I come in?" he asked. It was such a strange question. This was my home now.
Of course, I said.
He stepped inside slowly, looking around as if he hadn't really noticed the space before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe this was the first time he was seeing not just where I lived, but how I lived.
There was something different about him.
Lighter, but also heavier. "I got something," he said, holding out an envelope. I took it, my fingers brushing against his briefly, and for a moment, I felt that familiar connection again, the one that had never really disappeared, just buried under years of silence. "What is it?" I asked. "Just read it," he said. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were documents. Legal documents. I didn't need long to understand. Divorce papers. I looked up at him. He didn't look away. "It's done," he said quietly. "Or almost. It will be soon." I studied his face carefully, searching for regret, hesitation, anything. But what I saw instead surprised me. Relief. Not happiness, but relief. "When?" I asked. "2 weeks ago," he replied. "I didn't tell you right away. I needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" "That I wasn't doing it for the wrong reasons," he said. I nodded slowly. "And now?" I asked. "Now I know I waited too long," he admitted. That hurt more than I expected. Not because of what he said, but because it was true. We sat down, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. There was a weight in the room, but not the kind that suffocates. The kind that comes with honesty. "I should have seen it earlier," he said finally. "Everything you tried to tell me, everything I ignored. You weren't ready to see it," I said calmly. "That's not an excuse." "No," I agreed. "But it's the truth." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together like he was trying to hold onto something. "She's not who I thought she was," he said. I didn't respond right away, because that sentence carries a lot. Disappointment.
Guilt. Loss.
"She never was," I said gently. "You just saw what you wanted to see." He nodded slowly. "Probably," he admitted. There was another silence. But this one didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt necessary. "What happens now?" I asked. He exhaled, leaning back slightly. "I'm moving," he said. "Found a place closer to here. Not too big, just enough for me and the kids." "That's good," I said. "I want them to be near you," he added quickly. "If you want that." I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Effort. Not words. not promises. Effort. I do, I said. He nodded, and something in his shoulders relaxed. She's leaving the city, he continued. Going to stay with her sister for now. I didn't ask where. It didn't matter. Claire had already taken enough space in my life. She tried to fight it, he added. The money, the documents, everything. I almost smiled. I expected that.
She didn't win, he said. No, y replied quietly.
She didn't. We sat there for a while longer, talking about small things, the children, his new place, practical details. But underneath all of it, there was something deeper rebuilding itself. Not instantly, not completely, but slowly.
And that was enough.
Before he left, he hesitated again near the door. Mom, he said. I turned to him. I'm sorry, he added. Simple words. But this time they felt real. I walked closer and placed my hand on his arm. I know, I said. And for the first time, I meant it without hesitation. That evening, after he left, the apartment felt different again. Not empty, just open, like something had finally closed, allowing something else to begin. I made myself tea and sat by the window, watching the city settle into evening. Lights flickered on one by one, people moved through their lives, unaware of how much can change in just a few months. My phone buzzed softly on the table. A message from Daniel, my neighbor. He had moved into the building shortly after I did, quiet, thoughtful, with a kind of calm presence that didn't demand attention but somehow always felt reassuring. We had started talking during small gatherings, then coffee, then longer conversations that didn't feel forced. Coffee tomorrow morning? I looked at the message for a moment. Then I smiled. Yes, I replied. Simple.
Easy.
And yet meaningful. Because this wasn't just about coffee. It was about something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before.
Possibility.
Not dependence. Not obligation. Just possibility. I leaned back in my chair, letting that thought settle. A few months ago, I had walked out of a house thinking I was losing everything. But I wasn't. I was leaving behind something that had already been taken from me long before I stepped out that door. Respect. Freedom. Myself. And now, piece by piece, I was getting it all back. On my terms. In my time. Without asking for permission. And that, I realized, was the most powerful thing of all. 1 year later, I stood by the window of my apartment, watching the early morning light slowly fill the room, and for a moment, I allowed myself to simply exist in it. No tension, no anticipation of conflict, no need to prepare for someone else's expectations. Just quiet, just clarity, just me. It still surprised me sometimes, how something so simple could feel so unfamiliar after years of living differently.
A year.
It didn't feel like a long time, and yet everything had changed. My life no longer revolved around surviving someone else's control. It had structure now, but not the kind that traps you, the kind you build yourself. I had routines, but they were mine. Tuesdays were for painting classes, something I had never tried before, but now couldn't imagine giving up. Thursdays were for long walks or dinners with Laura. Weekends belonged to my grandchildren, and sometimes to Mark as well, though things between us had taken time to settle into something honest again. Not perfect, but real. That mattered more. The children adapted faster than anyone. They always do. They didn't question the changes the way adults do. They accepted them, shaped themselves around them, and kept moving forward. And every time they ran into my apartment with laughter and stories and energy that filled every corner, I felt something inside me soften in a way that reminded me why I stayed as long as I did.
For them.
But not anymore. Now I stayed for myself too. That morning wasn't just any morning, it was my birthday. 70. The number felt significant, not because it marked age, but because it marked distance. Distance from who I used to be, from what I tolerated, from the version of my life that had slowly narrowed until there was barely room left for me inside it. Now there was space again. Real space. By noon, the apartment was full. Not crowded, just full in the right way. The children were there, of course, already arguing over who would sit closer to me. Mark stood near the kitchen, more relaxed than I had seen him in years, talking to Laura as if a weight had finally been lifted from him too. It took time, but he changed. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough. Enough to see, enough to trust in small ways again. And then there was Daniel. He arrived quietly, as he always did, carrying a small box wrapped in simple paper. No grand gestures, no unnecessary words. That's what I appreciated about him from the beginning. He never tried to take space that wasn't offered, never assumed, never pushed. After everything I had been through, that kind of presence felt rare. "Happy birthday, Anna," he said, handing me the box. "Thank you," I replied, meeting his eyes for a second longer than usual. There was something there. Not urgency, not expectation, just understanding. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. The afternoon passed easily, filled with laughter, small conversations, and the kind of warmth that doesn't exhaust you. At some point, the children insisted on cake, and I gave in, even though I wasn't planning anything formal. Candles were placed, unevenly, of course, and when they told me to make a wish, I paused for just a moment. Not because I didn't know what to wish for, but because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to. I had everything I fought to get back. Still, I closed my eyes briefly, just out of habit, and when I opened them again, I felt lighter. Not because something new was coming, but because nothing was missing anymore. Later, when the apartment grew quiet again and everyone slowly left, the silence returned, but it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Daniel stayed a little longer. We sat by the window, the same place where my new life had quietly begun months ago, and for a while, neither of us spoke. It wasn't awkward. It never was. "I have something for you," he said eventually. I looked at him, slightly amused. "You already gave me a gift." "This one's different," he replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. Not flashy, not symbolic in the way people usually intend. Just a key. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "What is it?" I asked. "It's to a place outside the city," he said. "A small house near the lake. I've been going there on weekends." I waited. "I thought," he continued, then paused, choosing his words carefully, "maybe you'd like to see it sometime. Simple. No pressure.
No assumptions.
Just an offer." And that's why it mattered. Because it wasn't about the place. It was about choice. I looked at the key in his hand, then back at him. "A visit," I said. He smiled slightly. "A visit," he agreed. That was enough. Because I had learned something over the past year, something I wished I had understood much earlier. Life doesn't end when you lose something. It changes when you finally decide what you're no longer willing to lose. My independence, my dignity, my voice. Those weren't things I would ever trade again. Not for comfort, not for family, not for anyone. And yet, that didn't mean I had to live alone in the emotional sense. That was the difference. Freedom didn't mean isolation. It meant choosing. Choosing who stays. Choosing what matters. Choosing how you live. That night, after Daniel left, I stood by the window once again, holding the small key in my hand. The city lights reflected softly in the glass, and for a moment I saw myself there. Not the version I used to be, not the one who stayed too long or stayed too quiet, but someone else. Someone stronger. Someone clearer. Someone who had walked away and built something better. I thought back to that day. The ultimatum, the kitchen, the moment everything seemed to close in. It was meant to break me. Instead, it freed me. I smiled slightly, placing the key on the table. Because sometimes the end of one life isn't really an ending at all. It's just the moment you finally begin living your own. And this time, I wasn't going to stop.